Royal decisions are meant to be perfect, not fast, not loud. Perfect. Every order proposed, then weighed, then sealed, then dated, then sent. One step after the other, always in that exact line. Like beads on a wire. The Chancery knows it better than anyone. Write nothing you cannot date. Send nothing you cannot seal. Trust the order, not the hurry. That is the rule. And on that grey London morning, everything in the Chancery wing looked exactly as it should. Pale daylight came through tall windows and lay flat on the wooden floor. The corridors smelled of ink and old paper and candle wax that had cooled overnight. Ledgers sat closed in their rows. Brass lamps waited unlit. The dispatch desk near the far doors was clean, squared, ready. It was just another working day inside the palace. At least that is what everyone thought. Thomas Bell stood at the Chancery door. He had stood there for many years, long enough that the floor near his boots had worn a little smoother than the rest. He was not young. His back was straight, his face was still. His eyes moved only when they needed to. He did not lean, he did not shift. He stood the way the door itself stood, like part of the building that had simply learned to breathe. People sometimes forgot he was a person at all. Clerks came and went past him with armfuls of paper. Scribes carried trays of fresh pages. A messenger boy ran one way, then ran back the other way, then was scolded for running. None of them looked at Bell. That was normal. A guard at a door is furniture until the moment he is not. Inside the wing, the work moved the way it always moved. Slow, careful. A clerk read a draft aloud at a low table. Two others checked dates against a heavy book. The seal keeper's room sat at the heart of it all, behind a thick door, where the Great Seal lived in its box and only came out for orders that had earned their way to it. There was a sound the wing trusted more than any voice. A small brass handbell sat on the dispatch desk, plain worn bright on the handle from years of fingers. When an order had been sealed and dated and was truly ready to leave the building, the dispatch clerk lifted that bell and rang it once. One clear note, it meant the order had walked the whole line, proposed, weighed, sealed, dated. Now, and only now, sent everyone in the wing knew that note. They worked to it the way sailors work to a tide. A young clerk named Harold stopped near Bell that morning with a stack of folded papers under his arm. He was the joking sort. The wing had a few of those, and they all eventually tested themselves against the guard at the door, the way the brave ones always do. "Morning, Mr. Bell," Harold said. He waited. Nothing. He grinned at a friend further down the corridor. "You know the bell rang on its own again, last night, twice." He leaned in a little. "Cleaner swears it. No one near the desk, just rang." A clerk passing laughed under her breath. "Maybe the desk's haunted," Harold went on, enjoying himself. "Old order come back to be sent again." "You believe in that, Mr. Bell? A ghost that does paperwork?" No response, not a twitch. Bell's eyes stayed forward on the corridor. His hands stayed where they were. He had heard the haunted bell joke 100 times. The desk rang on its own now and then, late when the wing was empty, and the clerks loved the story because a haunted bell is more fun than a draft or a settling floor or a mouse. He let them have it. A joke costs nothing. A door that argues is not a door. Harold gave up as they all gave up and carried his papers on. The corridor swallowed him. The wing went back to its quiet rhythm of pages and dates and low-reading voices. It was an ordinary morning, soft, harmless. The kind that ends the way it began, with lamps put out and ledgers closed, and the bell silent on a tidy desk. But somewhere down the corridor, behind one of the closed doors, an order was already being prepared to leave. And it had not yet been sealed. Further along the wing, near the seal keeper's heavy door, a small knot of staff had formed, not unusual on its own. Clerks gather, but there was a shift in the air, the kind a man only feels if he has stood in one place long enough to know what the place feels like when nothing is wrong, and therefore knows the exact moment it changes. Voices dropped a little, papers were held a little closer. A senior clerk in a dark coat moved through the group with the easy weight of a man everyone trusted. Touching a shoulder here, taking a page there, smiling the small, even smile of someone who had worked these corridors longer than most. "It's going out now," someone said quietly. Bell's eyes moved, only his eyes. A messenger crossed the far end of the corridor at a fast walk, a folded dispatch in his hand, heading for the outer doors that led to the yard and the riders beyond. He moved with purpose. He moved like a man carrying something that had finished its journey through the wing and was now simply leaving. That was normal. Dispatches left all day. But Bell's ears were already waiting for a sound that had not come. The bell on the dispatch desk had not rung, not before the messenger, not as he passed, not behind him. The order was leaving the building, and the one note that was supposed to come first, the single clear sound that meant the whole line had been walked in order, had not been struck. It was nothing, of course. To everyone else, it was nothing. A clerk forgets to ring, a note is missed in a busy corridor. The wing breathed on, unbothered, sure of itself, but the silence stayed in the room where the sound should have been, and Thomas Bell, who had stood that door for years, did not look away from the corridor. He simply listened harder, because guards at the chancery door are not there to read the orders. They are there to watch the doorway, and a doorway he had long ago learned will tell you the truth about a building long before the paper does. The morning went on exactly as it should, but it had already begun. Part 2, for a while, nothing happened. The wing settled back into its slow water. Pages turned. The low reading voice at the corner table read another draft. The seal-keeper's heavy door opened and closed on its quiet hinge. Lamps were lit as the grey morning thickened, and the room glowed a little warmer, and the missing bell note was already forgotten by everyone who had been near enough to not hear it. Everyone except the man at the door. Bell did not move, that was the job, but his attention had changed its shape. Before, he had watched the corridor the way a man watches a road he knows. Now he watched it the way a man watches a road he knows when one stone in it has shifted. Same road, same eyes, different weight behind them. It was past midday when the young scribe came through. Her name was Eleanor Voss. She was new enough that she still walked carefully in the corridors, still held her papers with both hands as if they might escape, still glanced at the seal-keeper's door the way junior scribes do with a mix of respect and worry. She had a good hand. The older clerks said so when they thought no one repeated it. A clean, steady, honest hand, the kind that made a page easy to trust. She carried a folded order toward the dispatch desk. The wing barely noticed her. Why would it? A scribe carrying a dispatch is the most ordinary sight a chancery has. The senior clerk in the dark coat passed her in the corridor and said something low and kind, and she answered with a small nervous nod, and he went on, and that was that. Routine, paper moving through the place that moves paper. But Bell saw something fall slightly out of line. Not loud, not obvious. The kind of thing most people would never catch and would not believe mattered even if you pointed at it. Eleanor reached the dispatch desk. She set the order down, and as she did, through the half-open door at the end of the corridor, Bell could see into the outer passage where the messengers waited. A rider stood there already, cloaked, ready. A man does not stand like that for a dispatch that has not been finished. A man stands like that when he has been told a thing is coming, and coming soon, and to be ready before it does. The order was still on the desk. Unsent Eleanor had only just set it down, but the rider outside was already waiting for it as though it had been decided long ago. Bell's eyes went from the desk to the door to the rider and back, slow even. The wing read it as a guard, letting his gaze drift, if it read it as anything at all. It was not drift. He was measuring a distance that should not have existed yet. The distance between a decision that had not finished being made and a man already standing ready to carry it out. Eleanor lifted the small brass bell. She rang it once, one clear note, the way it was always done, the sound the wing trusted. The dispatch clerk took the folded order from her. The waiting rider beyond the doors straightened and turned to go. It looked perfect. It sounded perfect. The line had been walked. Proposed, weighed, sealed, dated, sent. The bell had rung. Everyone in earshot felt the small unconscious ease that the note always brought, the sense of a thing done properly, and went back to their work. But Bell had been listening to that bell for years, and he had heard it ring after the rider was already waiting. He said nothing. He did the only thing the door allowed him to do. He fixed the moment in his memory, exactly as it had happened, in order, the way he fixed everything. The rider already cloaked, the order still on the desk, then the note, then the handover. The sequence was there in his head, clean and undeniable, and the sequence was wrong. Most people in the wing would have called it nothing, a rider sent for early, a clerk who likes to be ready. There were a dozen soft, reasonable explanations, and the wing would have reached for any of them, because the wing trusted itself, and trusted the bell, and trusted the senior man in the dark coat who moved through it all with his small, even smile. Bell reached for none of them. He had stood this door long enough to know that a building does not break loudly. It breaks in the order of small things. A note that comes late, a rider that comes early, a scribe who carries a paper she did not have time to finish. He watched Eleanor walk back up the corridor. She was not smiling now. She had glanced down at her own hands as she left the desk, the way a person does when something they have done does not sit right, and they cannot yet say why. A small thing. Her steps slowed for half a pace near the sealkeeper's door. Then she went on, and the wing closed over her again like water over a dropped stone. Bell did not move from the door, but his focus had sharpened to a single point, and the point was this. The order had left the building before the note that was supposed to send it. Once is a mistake. He had spent a lifetime learning the difference between a mistake and a pattern, and the difference was always the same. It was whether it happened again. Part 3, it happened again. 3 days later, late in the afternoon, when the light in the wing had gone amber and tired and the clerks worked slower, and the corridors held that end-of-day hush where sound carried further than anyone meant it to. Bell was at the door. He had been at the door. In those 3 days, he had done nothing but stand and watch and remember, and to anyone in the wing, he had been exactly what he always was. A still man at a still post, as much a part of the building as the hinges. No one knew he had spent 3 days laying every dispatch he saw against the order it was supposed to follow. The way a carpenter lays a board against a true edge to see where it bows. The second order came down the corridor in the hands of a different clerk, but it followed the same crooked line. Bell saw the rider first, out in the passage, through the half door, cloaked and ready, the way the first one had been. Then he saw the dispatch still moving toward the desk, unsent, unrung. The waiting came before the sending. Again, the same gap, the same wrong distance, the same impossible readiness for a thing that had not yet been allowed to be real. And then the bell on the dispatch desk rang, but not from the desk. This was the detail. This was the one that no soft, reasonable explanation could cover. Bell heard the single clear note, and his eyes were already on the dispatch desk when it sounded, and no hand was on the bell. The clerk was 3 steps away with the order still in his arms. The brass handle was untouched. The desk was empty around it. The bell had rung after the dispatch had already gone out the far doors, by itself, into a corridor that did not understand what it was hearing. A nearby clerk laughed without looking up. "Ghosts at it again," she said to no one. Another answered, "Tell it to file something useful." A small ripple of tired amusement passed down the wing and died. The haunted bell, the desk that rang on its own. Their favorite story, comfortable as an old coat, and it had just walked across the room in front of them, and they had reached for the joke the way a cold man reaches for the coat. Bell did not reach for the joke. He had it now. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet thing turning over in his mind and locking into place. The bell did not ring to send the order. The bell rang after, to make the record say the order had been sent properly. The note everyone trusted was being struck at the wrong end of the line. Not a beginning, a cover. The wing heard that note and felt the order was clean, and went back to its pages, and never once looked to see whether the note had come first or last, because in all their years it had always come first, and a thing that has always been true is the easiest thing in the world to stop checking. Someone had learned exactly which sound a wing stops, listening to once it trusts it, and was ringing it on purpose, late into an empty room, so the record would close clean over an order that had been enforced before it was ever allowed to exist. Then Bell saw Eleanor again. She was at the corner table, not carrying anything, simply standing, and she was looking down at an open ledger with a stillness that did not belong to a junior scribe at the end of an ordinary day. Bell watched her trace a line on the page with one finger. Stop, go back, trace it again. Her shoulders had drawn in, her head had tilted down. He could not see the page from the door. He did not need to. He had watched enough people read their own name in a place they did not expect to find it to know exactly what that shape of a person meant. She had found her hand on something she had not finished. A clean, steady, honest hand, the kind that made a page easy to trust. The older clerks had said so. Someone else had heard it too and understood what it was worth and what it could carry. An order enforced before it existed needed, at the end, a name on the paper that the wing would believe without checking. A trusted hand, a junior one that could be made to look as though it had been hurrying, or careless, or worse, if anyone ever pulled the thread and needed someone holding the end of it. The senior clerk in the dark coat passed behind her just then. He rested a hand on her shoulder, light, kind, the way he rested it on everyone, and said something low, and his small, even smile did not change at all. Eleanor nodded without looking up. He moved on through the wing the way he always moved, trusted, easy, carrying the weight of a man no one in the building had ever once thought to measure. Bell measured him, not with his body. His body did not move. He measured him the way he measured everything, in order against the line things were supposed to follow. The senior man was always near the desk before the rings that came late. Always near the riders that waited early. Always the one whose hand had touched a page just before it left in the wrong sequence. Never the one carrying it out the door. Always one careful step back from the moment, with a kind word and an even smile, while a young scribe's honest hand was guided forward into the place where the blame would land if the floor ever opened. The wing still trusted the bell, still trusted the coat, still trusted the line, because the line had always held. But one man at the door was not listening to the wing anymore. He was listening to the order things happened in. And the order had stopped making sense in a way that pointed, every single time, away from a frightened girl with a good hand and toward a calm man with a kind one. Bell shifted his weight, barely. A guard at the chancery door does not move, does not step in, does not break his post. It was almost nothing, the smallest settling of a man who had stood still for years. No one saw it. The wing read its ledgers in the amber light and waited for the lamps and thought about going home. But it was the beginning of something that was not supposed to happen, because guards do not act on what they suspect. They stand, they watch, they let the building do the building's work, unless the building has stopped doing it. And one of them notices the exact order in which it stopped. Part 4. For a moment, nothing happened. The lamps were lit one by one down the wing. The amber light gave way to the steady yellow of evening work. The corner table emptied. Clerks began the slow end-of-day shuffle of closing books and squaring papers and pretending for another quarter hour that they were still working. Eleanor had not moved far from the ledger. She stood near it, the way a person stands near a thing they are afraid to be seen leaving, as though walking away would be admitting they had seen what was in it. The senior clerk in the dark coat moved toward the seal-keeper's heavy door with an unhurried step. He had a single folded order in his hand. The last of the day, he carried it the way he carried everything. Lightly, easily, a trusted man doing a trusted thing in a wing that had never once asked him to prove it. And he did not go to the seal-keeper. He went past the door, toward the dispatch desk. Order in hand. No seal struck, no date set. The line not walked. He moved like a man who had done this many times in exactly this light, when the wing was tired and folding itself away, and no one counted the steps. Bell's eyes were already on the brass bell. It sat on the desk where it always sat. And he understood with the cold, flat clarity of a man who has watched a thing too many times to mistake it, what was about to happen. The order would go out the far doors. Then, a moment after, the bell would ring into the empty corner where the desk was, by itself, the way a ghost rings a bell, and the record would close clean, and tomorrow the line would seem to have held, and somewhere in a ledger, a clean, honest hand would be sitting under an order it had never been allowed to finish. The dark coat reached the desk. The order went toward the far doors in a messenger's hand. The senior man's fingers moved without looking toward the brass handle, the small practiced motion of a man about to ring himself innocent. Bell turned his head, only his head. After years of facing forward, the simple turn of it was loud as a struck note in that quiet wing. A clerk near the door glanced up at the movement, the way you glance at a statue that has blinked. Then Bell stepped from his post. One step, off the worn place in the floor. It does not sound like much. In that wing on that evening, it cut through the room like a crack running across glass. Heads came up. The end-of-day shuffle stopped mid-motion. A junior clerk said half to himself, "Did Mr. Bell just and did not finish?" Because Mr. Bell did not do that. Mr. Bell had never once done that. The door did not leave the doorway. Bell did not rush. He did not break into anything. He walked, measured, direct, controlled, the way he had walked nowhere in years, because he had needed to walk nowhere, straight down the corridor, not toward Eleanor, not toward the messenger at the far doors, toward the dispatch desk and the dark coat standing at it, and the hand that was already on the brass bell. The hand reacted. Quick. It started to lift away from the bell, to fold back toward the coat, to become the hand of a man who had simply been passing the desk, the way it had always been able to before. Because no one had ever been walking toward it. Too late. Bell reached the desk. He did not raise his voice. He had barely used it in years, and he did not waste it now. He put one hand flat on the open dispatch ledger beside the bell, the great book where every order's line was supposed to be written in order, and he held it there, and he looked at the senior man in the dark coat, and he said 4 words, "Ring it, I'll watch." That was all, low, even, not a shout. The kind of words that do not need volume because the silence around them does all the carrying. The wing heard it. The wing did not understand it yet, but it heard the shape of it. The way a room hears a sentence that has changed something even before it knows what. The dark coat froze. The small even smile was still there, but it had stopped meaning anything, the way a lamp can still be lit after the oil is gone for a moment before it knows it, because they both understood what the 4 words meant. Ring it now, with the order still here, in front of the man holding the ledger open at the line where it should have been written. Ring it in the right place, at the start, where it had never once been rung. Or do not ring it at all, and let the wing watch the order go out into the corridor with no note before it and no note after, naked, in the wrong order, in front of everyone. The seal keeper's heavy door had opened. The seal keeper stood in it, drawn by the one impossible sound of a guard walking. A second guard, posted at the outer passage, had come to the half door, filling it, looking in at a corridor that had never needed him before. The messenger with the last order had stopped halfway to the doors, the folded paper in his hands, not knowing whether he was carrying something true. Now the wing was definitely noticing. Voices began, low, fast climbing. What's happening? Is the order? He's at the desk. Look, It was not the ghost. It had never been the ghost. And every clerk who had laughed at the haunted bell over the years felt the joke turn over in their stomach in the same moment, because a man at a door had just put his hand on the ledger and asked a trusted man to do, in front of them, the one ordinary thing he had apparently never once done in the right order. The dark coat tried. Even then, a trusted man's last instinct is to be trusted. "It's late," he said, light, reasonable, the voice that had moved through this wing for years and never been checked. "It's only the order of the writing, Bell. The order went out properly. The bell rings after," Bell said. 2 words. He did not look away. "It rings after. I have heard it. After the rider, after the door." He did not raise the ledger. He did not point at Eleanor. He simply held the book open at the line and let the silence put everyone in the wing in front of the same fact at the same time. An order is not real because the bell rang. The bell rings because the order is real. You have had it the wrong way round, on purpose, and you are going to write a name under it that was not yours. He did not say her name. He did not have to. Every head in the wing that had been turning toward the desk turned, for one moment, toward the corner table where a young scribe stood very still with her hand on a ledger of her own, and then turned back, and the wing understood, all at once, the way a room understands a thing it should have seen for itself a long time ago. The seal keeper crossed the corridor. The second guard stepped fully through the half door. The messenger set the last order down on a side table without being told, the way you put down something you are no longer sure you should be holding, and the dark coat at last took his hand off the bell. It had never rung. Not once, in the right place, in front of them. That was the whole of it. That was everything. The notes that the wing had trusted for years had been struck at the wrong end of every crooked line. And the one time a man stood ready to watch it struck at the right end, it could not be. Part 5, it was contained within minutes. Clean, quiet, almost gentle, the way the wing did everything, even this. The seal keeper took the last order and the open ledger and carried them to his heavy room, and the door closed on the slow hinge, and behind it the real work began of laying every dispatch of the last weeks against the line it should have followed and finding all the places the line bowed. The second guard stood now where Bell had stood, at the dispatch desk, and the wing rearranged itself around the new shape of the evening the way water closes around a stone, except this time it did not forget the stone. Eleanor Voss was brought away from the corner table, not by force. The seal keeper's clerk came to her, and an older scribe she trusted, and they spoke to her low and steady, and she nodded, and her breathing, which had gone tight and shallow without anyone seeing it go, slowly came back down. She had not been wrong about her own hand. Her name had been sitting under orders she had never finished, placed there because it was a good name, a clean one, a junior one, the kind a wing believes and a thread can be tied to. She understood that now. The understanding shook her, but it was the shaking of someone set down safely after a fall they had not known they were in, not the shaking of someone still falling. An older clerk knelt slightly to be level with her where she had sat, and said something quiet, and she nodded again, still pale but steady. The thing that had been built to land on her had been lifted off before it landed. Most people in the wing would never fully know how close it had come, or how thin the difference had been, or that the whole of that difference had been one man at a door who counted the order things happened in. The dark coat was taken away with no scene at all. That was the wing's way. No raised voices, no spectacle. A trusted man walked out of the corridor between two others, his small, even smile finally, completely gone, and the wing watched him go in a silence that said more than any noise could have, because a wing that had trusted a man for years has no louder sound than the quiet of watching it stop. Bell had returned to the chancery door. He had not waited to be thanked. He had taken his hand off the ledger the moment the seal keeper's hand came onto it, and he had walked back, measured, direct, controlled, to the worn place on the floor, and he had faced forward again and become the door again as though nothing in him had moved at all. The clerks who passed him now passed differently. They did not joke. One or two slowed, as if to say something, and found there was nothing to say that the man at the door would once said, and went on. That was its own kind of respect, and he received it the only way he received anything, which was to not appear to receive it. Then, from the far end of the corridor, a figure came. You knew him at once, not by anything loud, by the way the wing changed around him, the way clerks straightened without being told, the way the corridor seemed to make room before he had asked for any. He held something the staff in the wing answered to without needing it explained, the quiet weight of an office that did not have to announce itself. He had been sent for, or had heard. The way that the people at the top of a thing always somehow hear when the line that holds it has been pulled straight by a man who was only supposed to stand at a door. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a scene. He went first to Eleanor, a short while. A few words, a steady look, a small check that a young scribe was whole and would stay whole. She answered him quietly, and he listened to all of it, which was its own message to the wing. And then he straightened, and then he turned, and looked down the corridor at the man at the chancery door. Just a look, but it carried everything. Acknowledgement, understanding, the particular respect of a man who runs a great thing for a man who quietly kept a piece of it from breaking. No words. None were needed. The look said, I know what almost happened here. I know it did not, and I know why it did not, and I know it was you, and I know you will not want it said aloud, so I will not say it. Bell gave the smallest nod, almost nothing, the kind of nod a door gives if a door could, and just like that, it was done. The wing slowly came back to itself. Lamps were trimmed. Books were closed, properly this time by people who had just remembered all at once that the order they were closed in actually mattered. Voices returned, lower than before, carrying the thing that everyone now half knew and would tell wrong for years, the way wings always do. Did the bell really ring on its own? Was that what it was? I always said that desk was strange. They had fragments. They did not have the whole. Only one man had ever had the whole, and he had it in the only place it was safe, which was the order of it, kept straight in the head of a man who kept things straight for a living. Eleanor was guided out toward the quieter rooms, away from the corridor, away from the desk, the older scribe's hand light on her shoulder. Near the doors she stopped and looked back, once down the long corridor to the still figure at the chancery door. No fear in it now, just recognition. He did not look back at her, he did not need to. The look had already been given by the man whose look settled things, and Bell did not collect a thing twice. The brass bell sat on the dispatch desk in the lamplight, plain. Worn bright on the handle, it would ring again tomorrow and the day after, and for years, and from now on it would ring where it was supposed to ring, at the start of the line, struck by a hand in front of a wing that had remembered, the hard way, to listen for when. Bell stood the door, still, unshaken, exactly as he had always been. Except that now everyone who passed knew what that stillness had been holding the whole time. Behind the silence, behind the years, behind the man who never moved, had been someone who never stopped counting, who knew that a royal decision is not a thing that becomes true because someone powerful acts on it. It becomes true by walking its line, proposed, weighed, sealed, dated, then, and only then, sent. And anyone who skips a step in that line is not using authority. They are only wearing it, the way the dark coat had worn his small even smile, until a man who guarded a door looked at the order of things and saw the difference. He had not been the strongest man in the wing. He had not been the quickest, or the cleverest, or the highest. He had only known, better than anyone, the order in which true things are allowed to happen, and he had refused on one ordinary evening to let a true-looking thing skip its place in the line, and in a palace on that grey day in London, that was more than enough.